Well, the synchronicity of finding this particular track at this particular time couldn't be more poignant. I mean, Marley sings, "This morning I woke up in a curfew. There's faces standing over me. They're dressed in uniforms of brutality," and then goes on to say, "Look, if things don't change, there's going to be burning and looting."
And yet here we are 50 years on. What has changed?
Not a lot, evidently. I mean, listen, Sam Cooke sang a long time ago, a change is going to come in, what, like 63? That's nearly 6 decades ago. And obviously things haven't changed. And that's led to where we are today.
David, you're, I would suggest, younger than both Don and I. What did you make of seeing the footage?
I don't know what gave that away. You would think that was the soundtrack to the current moment that we're going through. One of the lyrics that stuck out to me the most is when he said, "How many rivers will we have to cross until we can see the bus?" We're still trying to see the bus right now. We're still trying to speak to management and say, can we get better pay? Can we get better hours? Can we have a better experience at work? We're still trying to speak to HR, metaphorically speaking, when it comes to the struggle that we face as Black people. So it's just very interesting to me to see that music that talks about our pain through the ages, through the decades, is as relevant now as it ever was back then. And it's very interesting because back then, it was more difficult to speak out. Black Lives Matter, talking about these things, is so easy to speak about right now. But even then, when it was tougher to speak about, the pain in the lyrics still resonates with what we're facing now.
And Don, you're shaking your head a lot during
in agreement, because what that song is it's a lament for the thousands of years of crap people of color have had to put up with, and it's a warning. It's a warning that if you don't do the right thing, burning and looting.
But you were growing up then, Don, when Bob Marley wrote that song, when he performed that song.
Yeah.
What exactly was he speaking to then? What was your experience of growing up at that point in time?
Well, I'm a child of Windrush, first generation British-born Black, kind of rolls off the tongue now. But back then, a very confusing concept, believe me. And Bob came into my life at a time when we were like a lost tribe. The Black and British thing didn't really mean anything back then, and we were looking for clues to Jamaica because we're of Jamaica, but we weren't quite Jamaican. And we're looking to America, obviously, because the whole civil rights thing. But, this country's social development and America's social development are very different. But that's not to say we don't have very similar problems.
David Whiteley, I mean, you talk about, how many rivers will you have to cross before you can speak to the boss, how not enough has changed. Does that suggest that protest music doesn't really lead to change?
Well, I don't know, because, protest music is very, very important for many, many reasons. I mean, listening to that song brought an awakening in me and stirred up a fire in me to remember that this fight has been fought for a long time. And if we don't pick up the baton and carry it on, then we are letting down the people that have fought before us. And so if the music initiates a fire and a spark within me to continue the fight, then I'd say that it's very relevant. And when you listen, not just listen, but visually as you watch him perform that song, you can see the pain through the performance. You can see that this is not a song being sung in happiness. This is a song. It's a lament. It's a lament, and it's a song of pain. And when you feel like your pain is being resonated with, it's also very emotionally, I wouldn't want to say satisfying, but it helps. It helps to know that you're not going through this alone. So there's many aspects in which it helps emotionally, which can then get a person ready and reared up to do their part.
I mean, Don, does it speak to a failure of protest music? You mentioned Sam Cooke. You think about Marvin Gaye singing "What's Going On," "Brother, Brother, There Are Too Many of Us Dying." That could be a piece of music that we're still playing today.
Yeah, I don't think it's a failure in music. I mean, listen, you said music possibly hasn't changed things, but music has the potential to change people, and people are things. Bob believed in music as a tool for social change. It wasn't about selling your sneakers, it's about changing your mind. And that's made me who I am today. So I'm a great believer in protest music and music as a form of social change. And the protests right now have indeed already changed things. I think the chokehold's been banned in Minnesota. I think some states have already introduced a law where officers seeing others doing bad things have to intervene. So things can change. It's just a shame that we've had to get so extreme for it to happen.
David Whiteley, do you want to pick up on that?
I don't know. Just the term protest music is just very interesting to me because it's like, I don't know whether it's just me, but the word protest would, for me, diminish what's happening here, what's being sung about, what we're talking about right now. We're talking about the marginalization and murder of Black people. It's not a hashtag. It's not a TikTok dance. It's not a game. This is a protest for serious stuff. We want to live, is what we're saying. So I don't know. Protest music makes it diminishes it for me when really this is a cry. This is a cry for survival. That's what when I hear that song, I hear somebody saying, I want to survive. I want my people to survive. And if we don't continue to speak out, then how are we going to make any change? So if music is a form of information, it's a form of expression of oneself. But the information is we want to live. The information is if things don't change, we have to make them change.
And Don Letts, I just want to ask you, why do you think this moment is different? Because the horrific killing of George Floyd, we know, is only at the end of a very long line of Black people being killed at the hands of police or being killed in horrific circumstances in America. We know Black people have died in custody here in too great a number. Is this different now?
I'm 64 years old. I've seen a lot of protests. I was at the Brixton riots, I was at the Notting Hill riots, but nothing has had the knock-on effect of this particular movement right now. It's not a moment, it's a movement, and it's not going to stop. I mean, you know, those guys taking down the statue, Colston statue in Bristol, that rocked my world because they opened the door to the truth and reality. And in the 21st century, I think the truth is the most radical weapon we have at our disposal. You know, it's shone a light on the legacy.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can I just ask you on the point of the statues, both of you, the Prime Minister has spoken about how we shouldn't be erasing history, that the statues belong to our history. What do you say about that?
Listen, we ain't talking about erasing history. We're talking about telling the goddamn truth. You understand me? I mean, you know, they said they shouldn't take down Colston's statue because of all these charitable activities. I mean, you wouldn't put up a statue of Jimmy Savile, would you? And what do you think the British Empire was made of, if not criminal activity? We got to get real here.
David Whiteley?
How I see it is we just have to be truthful about history. And the history of anybody that was a slave owner is not something that we should perpetuate and promote. That's something you hang your head in shame about and say, we're sorry that had to happen. That's not something that you memorialize immortally in a statue that people look up to and gawk at. That's how I feel about it. And I don't feel like people should be pulling down statues. I feel like the government should be pulling down statues. I feel like the law itself, the government itself, the system itself should want these things to be taken down because they are offensive to people and they hurt. Those statues literally say to people that we are okay with how you are treated. We are okay with the fact that you are the bottom of the barrel of our society. That's what those statues say to us if you are going to promote and memorialize somebody that was a slave owner.
Would you like to see Winston Churchill's statue brought down?
If Winston Churchill had anything to do with judging people for the color of their skin, then I believe that statue should be taken down. It's as simple as that. As long as that is true, the statue should be taken down. Like,
even if he defeated fascism, was part of the fight against fascism.
No, the whole Winston Churchill thing, I mean, it's going to upset a lot of people, but, you know, people got to understand that this misrepresentation of history that's presented gives these right-wing boneheads justification. I mean, Churchill, that whole bulldog spirit, I mean, you know, I know this is going to really piss people off, but to a lot of people of colour on this planet, the British Empire was not that far from the Third Reich, if you're really honest. You know what I mean? They went around the world with guns and nuns. That's how the empire was made. The government should be acknowledging this fact, putting their hands up and saying, yeah, it ain't cool putting up these statues that make you feel like second-class citizens. But they haven't done that, so we've had to take things into our own, you know, and do it for ourselves, because it's taking too long.
Going forward, picking up on that point that David Whiteley's made about feeling like second-class citizens, I wonder whether, returning to the music, you see really strong, powerful musical figures like Stormzy now, Dave, his incredible performance of Black is beautiful, Black is excellent. changing the narrative. How important is that?
You know, man, people seem to love the culture, but not so many actually like the people. And we need to really, all of us need to educate ourselves, drop the hate and educate. You know, because listen, you know, what made me the man I am today is looking at the sum total of Black history, the thousands of years of creativity pre-slavery, and the hundreds of years after that we've contributed to civilization. And as bad as slavery was, that's the stuff that I focus on. And that's what made me the man I am today. I don't feel like no goddamn second-class citizen. I can match you all. Everything you can put up, I can match you, and probably predate you.
David Whiteley, final thought to you, if you would. How optimistic are you at this point?
Extremely optimistic, and because of what I see happening right now. But optimism is all we have. The alternative is to just lay down and accept things as they are, which I have no intentions of doing.
You know, I'm optimistic because of the energy that I've seen through the youth. And I mean, because I've got to be honest, when we entered the 21st century, like young people, all I want to do is dance and escape. But now I've seen them all actively getting involved in something that's going to determine the rest of their lives. So I'm extremely optimistic and excited by what I'm seeing going on around the world.
What I've noticed is that the people that used to be in power used to be government people, people of the system, but now you have these celebrities that aren't making their money off the backs of other people's sufferings, and that allows them to have a heart. And that's a big part of why things are changing now, because people with money, people with influence who have a heart are speaking out, and it makes me, and that will encourage their fan bases and their people to speak out. And so I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic when I see the amount of white people at these protests, the amount of white people speaking out, the amount of people coming together to say, no, this is not the world that we want to live in. We want things to change. So I'm extremely optimistic.
Don Letts, David Whiteley, it's been a pleasure to speak to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.